Well, well, well. What do we have here? Well, well, well. Well, well, well. What do we have here? Hey everybody, welcome back to the Brain Domain. It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday, in it. Welcome back, Brain Domainers. Time for another exciting week. Christina Amazon, thank you for the 400 bits. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hello everybody, welcome in. How are you doing today? Putting some change in the jar this fine Tuesday. Thank you so much. If you want to just go ahead and pass the box along down the row. Just go ahead and pass the collection box. We'll see what ends up inside it. Alright everybody, welcome in. We've got a full presentation today. Hiring RNs for the ICE detention facility in the middle of the desert in California City, and the job posting says $3K per week. That's how the fascists get you. That's how the fascists get you. You'll notice that jobs will suddenly have adequate pay and benefits whenever there's a fascist modus behind it. Isn't that interesting how that works? You know, we can't pay actual correctional facility workers or nurses or teachers or, you know, any of those other jobs. You know, can't pay them a living wage, but you know, if you could, you know, maybe do a little bit of evil while you're doing it. Maybe if you could make it a little evil. Isn't it funny that the evil jobs in capitalism always pay the most? Kind of makes you wonder. Kind of makes you wonder about the whole system. But what do I know? I'm just a guy in space. I'm just a guy in space. What do I know? Need to revamp the sub goal. It's a little too high. We'll take it down to 230. Normally my goal for the month is to hit around like 300 subs. We'll do it in increments. We'll do it in increments. Alrighty. All right, everybody. You know the drill. And if you don't, here's the drill. We've got the question box open. So if you have any questions that you'd like to submit, feel free to do so. We also have a big, meaty presentation. A big, meaty presentation today. Look at the length of this one. This one's got some heft. But it's important. It's an important topic, so we're trying to be thorough. We've got some ground to cover. And you know me, I don't like a two-parter. I don't like a two-parter. Casey and I are going to be making sushi tonight. That'll be fun. Making some sushi rolls. I need to wake up. I need to lock in. I don't know what it is, but today I'm the sleepiest psychologist in outer space. Thought this song was Dire Docks for a second. You mean, this one? Alrighty. So, how are you feeling today? How are you feeling? Any good W's lately? Any wins you'd like to share with the rest of us? We've had a lot of W's lately over the past few weeks, so don't hold out on me now. You've got me hooked. You've got me addicted to W's, and if you don't keep giving it to me, I'm gonna go into W withdrawals. And we don't want to see that happen because it'll make me cranky. So... I didn't burn my pasta today. That's good. That's a W. I'm trying to think if there's a way that we can tweak that a little bit so that it doesn't feel as self-deprecating. Finished the book club book, went for 2 walks, and reorganized my clothes. You're just killing it lately. Honestly, it's impressive. Which just reminds me of something we've talked about before. It's like getting started really is the hardest part. You gotta take those really small steps in the beginning as you build up momentum. But once you've got that inertia, once you've got things in motion, things can really start moving in the direction that you're trying to go. So that's good. Just keep up the momentum. The book club book is very inspiring and did something to my brain. That's why I chose it. That's why so I started that book and I was like, this is a nice book. I really like this book. And I'm like, you know what? We've always been thinking about a book club, and so let's just go ahead and do it with this one. This one will be a great one to get started off on. I need to finish. I've loved what I've read so far. I'm gonna give people a little bit longer, like maybe another few days or a week or so to finish up that one. And then I'm gonna see if people want to hop on to do like a little discussion. We might do like a little voice chat in the Discord or something. I should read it too. It's on Amazon Premium if you got Amazon. It's not a long book. It's only like 100-something pages. It's a very easy read. Any deadlines, LOL? You got a week then. If you don't finish it in a week, I'm gonna 1v1 you in Minecraft. I listen to it. I also listen to it. I like audiobooks. Allows me to multitask. What I've noticed is that when I do audiobooks, I won't always pay perfect attention to the audiobook, and I feel like that's some people's hang-up is like, well, I get distracted and then I feel like I'm not intaking it properly. What I've noticed is like when I go back and re-listen to things that I've listened to already, there's a part of it's like, okay, yeah, I kind of remember this. This feels familiar. I feel like part of my brain was just kind of absorbing it without my awareness. This is true for falling asleep too. I listen to music falling asleep a lot. You know, there's a certain like level of consciousness where you're kind of in the in-between between wake and sleep. And it's interesting how that affects our perception. Like if you've ever fallen asleep with the TV on or something, and the things that you're hearing on the TV are like working its way into your dream. Alright. This is a Alright, now this is a question. Alright. The question here is, why are there stalkers? Why do they fall down that path? Alright. Let's get into it. Why are there stalkers? Well, where do we begin? Is it related to OCD? See, now the thing about stalking is that before we even get into why people stalk other people, let's take a look at some of the different angles, the reasons why people would stalk in the first place. Some of it's like a obsessive, like romantic interest, and then in others it's more like malicious. Like you're stalking them as a means of like trying to continuously frighten them and make them feel uneasy. And so I would say that most stalking probably falls into one of those two categories. You're either obsessed with this person and you're in love with them, and that's why you're, you know, standing outside their house in their bushes or going through their garbage. And then you've got the flip side of that, which is the malicious, insidious stalkers. They're doing this for revenge. They're doing this because you've hurt them in some way. You know, maybe this was an abusive ex and you left them and now they're just like following you around trying to fuck with you. So most stalking tends to fall into one of those two. Let's take a look at one of those, and we'll kind of look into the motives of that. Let's start with the romantic type. Let's say that, you know, this could, like, I'll give you an example, like celebrities will sometimes have people like show up in their house. They'll go to their house and they'll like break in and they'll just like be there and they'll just act like they live there. They're not doing it because they want to hurt the person. They're not trying to scare the person. They just feel like we're meant to be together. I think it was Taylor Swift. It may have been somebody else, but they had like a stalker that was basically like living in their house for an extended period of time while they weren't there, and they were just like eating their food and sleeping in their bed and that kind of stuff. It may have been her, it may have been somebody else. This type of thing's probably happened more than once anyway, because that's... The reason why people do this is because they have manic delusions. These are the delusions that this person is my soulmate, that we're meant to be together, we're perfect for each other, you know, and... You know, it comes from a delusional place. This person is most of the time harmless because they're infatuated with the person. They love this person. Now, they might not be harmless in all instances. In some cases, it's like, well, if I can't have them, nobody can have them, and then it can quickly become very dangerous and scary. And so for most of these people, it comes from a delusional place. Like, these people just aren't well mentally. And that's why they do it. Because they don't recognize that this is a harmful, inappropriate behavior. From their perspective, they probably think they're doing the right thing. They're like, wow, if they knew how hard I worked, if they knew how much time and energy I put into our relationship, you know? Like, so from their perspective, they're doing the right thing. They're going to win this person over. They're going to be just blown away by their, you know, dedication to them. And so, like, what sort of underlying things could be perpetuating that delusion? This person could have, some other type of mental condition that causes delusions. Schizophrenia, bipolar, schizoaffective. It could be due to a person's issues with attachment in their life. It could be due to a person's experiences in life. For whatever reason, they think that what they're doing is okay. And they think that if they just keep it up and if they just keep trying and they keep working on it, eventually they'll be together because they're meant to be together. And so that's typically how that happens. There are also some other types of delusions that go into that, but like delusions of reference. Delusions of reference, I'll give you an example of them while explaining them. Delusions of reference makes it feel like when you hear something, you feel like it's meant just for you, as if there's a secret message. And so this message is meant just for you. And you feel like it is. That's a delusion of reference. It could be a commercial, it could be a song, it could be, just about anything. But you feel like, wow, this was meant just for me. By the way, that message was meant for no one in particular. 15 with the 27. Thank you, thank you. And so delusions of reference is an important one when it comes to stalking behaviors, because if you have like a musician or some other celebrity that you like, it's like you're gonna pick up things like in their public appearances, in their interviews, in their music, in their art, and you're gonna feel like they understand me. This is meant for me. They're not allowed to communicate with me. They know they can't be with me because they're so rich and famous, and they don't want to, put my life into jeopardy. And so they're only pretending that we're not in a relationship to keep me safe, but they send me messages through their music. Reminds me a lot of parasocial relationships. That too. That's another aspect of it. When I talked about those two types of categories of stalking, we can apply that to both physical stalking and cyber stalking. People will cyber stalk for the same reasons that they stalk in real life. But stalking in real life is a full-time job and not everybody's cut out for it, so most people just try to do it at a work-from-home basis. People want to feel like they're understood. People want to feel like they've got somebody that can be like a life partner for them. And so that's kind of what drives these behaviors. It's like people just so desperately don't want to be alone that they will even go to extreme lengths to do what they think is right to secure a partner. So you've got the romantic side of stalking, and then you've got the dangerous, scary, malicious side of stalking. And the reasons for that are typically, a bit more sociopathic. They're trying to hurt you. They're trying to make you feel afraid because it gives them a sense of power and control. So that one's a bit easier to understand. This could be like an abusive ex that just had a hard time letting go, and so now they're showing up at your work. It all comes down to power and control in that case. So I've kind of explained how stalking happens and like why it happens because of human behavior, but if you look at it on a deeper level, if you look at like human biology, human evolution, we are persistence hunters. The way that we used to catch our food was to just keep chasing it. Just keep chasing it until it gets tired and gives up and lets you catch it. And so I think in a way you could view stalking behaviors as a sort of twisted manifestation of one of our innate drives. Chase after your goal until you get it. Robin with the 11 months. Thank you. Hey, Papa in chat. GNG here. Hope everyone's having a lovely day. I don't know if I ever mentioned in chat, but I'm an aspiring author. I got a publisher to look at my book, and though she didn't finish it, she gave it a 6.5 out of 10. Not bad for our first run. It reminded me when IGN and other sites only reviewed the first few episodes of BoJack Horseman Season 1 and gave it a similar review. Not saying my work is on par with the Sad Horse Show, but I think finishing it would raise the rating. Maybe, but I'm just gonna be blunt and honest. If the first half of the book, and let's use it as let's not even talk about BoJack. Let's talk about BoJack Horseman. You know, if those first few episodes don't draw you in and make you want to watch more, are they doing their job? Like, I understand the premise of a slow burn and a build-up, but you have to like entice people to want to finish. That's just a part of making media. And so the way I would look at it is, okay, what do I need to do to the first half that makes people want to push through to where it really gets good? But it was good feedback, and I know what to do now to press forward. Also, it looks like I'll be working for this publisher as a freelance editor while looking for a steady job. That sounds fun. I only got this in because of my mom. But I feel like nowadays nepotism is the only way to get a job. Unfortunately true. But it's been that way forever. It's gotten worse, but it's always been that way. It's always been who you know rather than what you know. That's why so many just incompetent children of bosses have been hired throughout all ranks of life. I bet you can probably think of some in the jobs that you've worked in any type of field. You've seen people who are brought on or hired on because they were either somebody's friend or somebody's relative. Even though they weren't really cut out to do the job. You probably see it happen all the time, and that's because it's the norm. That's what people do. So I'm excited, but also a little nervous. The publisher and I are going to talk about one of her projects tomorrow, so I'll remain excited. Just a little update on how things have been going in my world. Sounds fun. Sounds exciting. You'll get some first-hand experience within the publishing world. You'll learn a lot. Some person in her chat is allowed to chat and victim blame people for staying through abuse, but if I call it out, I get a timeout for an hour, like, okay, I'm so done. Over in that community, timeouts are used as an opportunity to just cool off. They're not meant as a punishment, so. Again, I don't know the context, but that's why they're supposed to be timing people out. This idiot had the audacity to say just leave when someone died from an abusive relationship. Well, what do we do with idiots? Do we get mad at them for being idiots, or do we try to educate them so that they're not idiots anymore? You know, it's understandable to get fired up around the topic of abuse, especially if you've endured abuse in your life. You know, if you're a survivor of abuse, then mentions of abuse can rightfully fill you with a sort of righteous fury. Just try to channel that energy wisely. That fire's burning hot inside you. You know, if it's just one chatter in a community that's bothering to you, just block that person. You know, I don't know. I don't know. Like leaving and unfollowing, and it just feels a bit reactive. You know, understandably so. It's more upsetting that I didn't see that person get a timeout, only me. Twitch chat moves too fast to police it correctly. So we can't really get hung up on this person got timed out, I didn't get timed out. Twitch chat moves too quickly to accurately enforce it to that degree. You know? I want to explode. I wouldn't recommend it. I would try something different. Explosions have splash damage. Have you watched the Crash Course Psychology series? I have not. What are they all about? Oh, Hank Green. I like Hank Green. I know Hank. I follow him on YouTube. Didn't know he had a TV show. YouTube thing, I think. Oh, it's got an IMDb page, so I assumed it was. It's a YouTube thing, but it's got an IMDb page. Based on the 2013 AP Psychology curriculum. So it basically gives you a run through of like Psych 101 at like a college level. Maybe a little bit above. This looks like a great place to start if you are wanting to get into the field of psychology. You know, it covers a lot of the major topics that they cover as a well, it's because it is based on the curriculum from like an AP Psych course, which would be like advanced high school level, or like college freshman. I get that homunculus feeling when I meditate sometimes. That's how you know it's working. That's how you know it's working. Pretty trippy. You know, some of the most surreal psychedelic moments that I've experienced were in moments of deep meditation. In a way, psychedelics just kind of show you what your brain can do if you can learn how to do it. You know, that altered state, that, you know, altered state of consciousness. My biggest struggle with meditation is not falling asleep. That's a good problem to have. If you're able to meditate to that degree that you fall asleep, that's good. That's why so many practice it sitting up. You can also practice it doing other stuff. You can do it while you're walking around. You can do it while you're tidying your house. You know, meditation is something you can do anywhere, anytime. You can also meditate to help you fall asleep. It's another good way to start practicing it. Just do it before bed. I had a feeling of sitting in a tree with an owl during meditation. What sort of feelings did this owl evoke? Did it feel familiar? Did it feel new? What were the intentions of said owl? Was it a hoot? Ha ha ha! Bet it was. How does meditation work during tasks? I've never really meditated outside of like half lotus. When you're doing a task, be the task. Exactly, it's like that flow state. You lose yourself in the task. You know, so when you're standing there doing dishes, it's not you standing there doing dishes. You are the washing of dishes. You are that force of cleansing. A good place to start would be to do it while walking. Just go on a walking meditation and just try to take in everything that's around you. Don't rush to describe it. Don't rush to, latch on to anything. Just take in. Alrighty, gang, we've got a big, meaty presentation today. We got a big, meaty presentation. Look at the, sneak peek. No looking. Let's see, what does this clock in at? 16 slides. That's a big boy. The reason why it's so long is because we go through a bunch of different examples of different things that get misused. So I think you're going to get a kick out of this one today. And we'll probably go ahead and get it started here pretty soon. It's not long, you're gaslighting us. Well, I'm just glad somebody finally noticed. Hey, I'm the questioner who wrote in about my father cheating on my mom and them being together for over 3 decades. I'm just pretty frustrated that after all the shitty things he's done, my mom still wants to live with him and go to marriage therapy with him. And you know, that's her choice to do. It wouldn't be the choice that you would make, it's what it sounds like. It sounds like this wouldn't be your choice. And so you're trying to have empathy and understanding for your mom, and you're like putting yourself in her position, and you're like, you would be angry if you had to make that choice, but this is her choice to make. You know, so 3 decades of being married to somebody is a long time. You know, and it can be hard to throw that away, even if what the other person did was genuinely heinous. It just sounds like she wants to try to do the right thing. And so it's understandably frustrating. I've been supporting her, but it's hard to see her almost forget his behavior and communicate to me that she has an obligation to work things out as his wife. Only if he's willing to make that obligation too. This isn't just her problem to fix, alright? Zen with the 42. Zen, you've hit the sacred number. You've hit the sacred number of 42. You have now unlocked the answer to life, the universe, and everything. But you have to keep it to yourself. Thank you, Zen, for the 42, my friend. She feels like she has an obligation. You know, I'm not going to blame a person for feeling that, especially when they've been with somebody for 3 decades. That's a long time, you know? It's a long time to be with somebody. It's just, you want to see that both sides are willing to do what they need to do to work on it. This isn't just her problem to fix. So I hope she recognizes that. You know, I hope that her energy and investment would be matched. And she says that she wants to work things out, and to me, it's like, what else can he do and get away with because she'll just forgive it all? It sounds like she's kind of waking up to it a bit, you know, even to take things this far. You know, I don't think that it's... I wouldn't dismiss her, you know, I feel like if she really were that, like, naive and forgiving, it's like she probably wouldn't even be questioning it right now, you know? She probably wouldn't be going through the process of, like, therapy and stuff. And so I would give her a chance, you know, to take the time she needs to figure things out. Because that's also something that happens in life. Is the older you get, sometimes the slower it can be changing your mind on stuff. And so I would just talk to her about, like, if you do want to try to work it out, make sure that he's willing to do the work that he needs to do, make sure that he's accountable for everything that he's done. Because you want to emphasize that you don't want to see her hurting. And he needs to recognize that he has hurt her. It's a tough decision to be in, especially in a later stage in life. Which hurt do I want to go with? Do I want to go with the hurt of whatever my significant other is doing to me? Or do I want to deal with the hurt of being alone? And so maybe she's just trying to go with the pain that feels lesser for her. Because she has a painful choice to make. I've spent a long time not feeling anger in my life, and now that I'm not suppressing it, I'm communicating it to my mom, and she doesn't understand it sometimes. She'll say she's worried I'm turning bitter about my dad because I haven't talked to him or been around him since I found out about his cheating. When you come at somebody in an angry way, and even though the anger's not directed at her, people will dismiss whatever you're saying because you deliver it in an angry way. It doesn't matter how factual or true it is, people just tend to be more dismissive of things when they're delivered from a place of anger. They'll just assume that you're only acting out of anger. They'll just assume that you're only saying such critical things because you're mad. And so if you want to talk to her about these things, you're going to have to try to do it in the calmest way possible. And that's going to be challenging because your anger is still very fresh. And it's also justified, but we want to try to channel that energy into something else. She'll say I don't sound like myself, but it's the one time in my life where I'm not instantly forgiving my dad's behavior and actually recognizing how he's hurt me and the people I love. And if you were to just sit down and talk to her about those things in the same way that I'm talking to you right now, she might be more willing to listen. People tend to, whenever somebody expresses anger vocally, other people tend to, clam up and go on the defense, even if the anger's not directed towards them. It's just a natural reaction to people making angry vocalizations. And so it's really important to remember that. My message will be distorted and unclear when I add anger to it. We often like to think that anger adds emphasis and impact, and it makes it more likely to be delivered, but it doesn't. Maybe you can express your feelings to mom in a letter first. That might be nice. Just write it all down, and then that way she can, you won't leave anything out. She's saying it doesn't sound like you because she doesn't identify you as an angry person. So don't give her one when you want to talk about this, even though it's stuff that makes you angry. We gotta talk about it in a way that is not angry. Feels so strange that I'm holding on to the hope that she might leave him, but her knowing that I want that doesn't seem to matter. She has to be the one to want it. You gotta give her time to get there. And it's her relationship, I know, but I question regularly if it's an emotionally abusive one, and he's gotten away with manipulating things for decades. You know, and she's going to therapy, so maybe she'll be able to recognize some of those patterns in therapy. You know, maybe that'll help the pieces click together for her. Like she almost has empathy for him that has been poisoned for so long that it feels normal. Yeah, it sounds like she's used to minimizing and just signing off on his behavior. I also question if what he's saying to her is genuine now that she's confronted him and they are starting marriage therapy, etc. Like, is he just saying he wants to get better, he feels sorry, or is that all just a game? My mom even says he's been saying how great I am to her, which seems odd because where was that before all this? He was so distant, and him taking accountability seems so foreign. I don't know if I should just be like, oh look, he's trying and cares, I'll just forgive him. I don't want to fall for an act or see my mom do that either. How can I tell what's real? Thank you. By proceeding with caution. You want to take the time that you need to make sure that his actions back up his words. You don't have to just immediately believe him. You know, if he says those things, you say, okay, I'll prove it. Let's see you do it consistently. I think a letter is a good idea. You know, just to put into words these ideas and those things that you want your mom to understand. You know, you care for her, you support her, and you don't want to see her get hurt. And I feel like that's what matters most. And so, as justifiably angry as you may be, we don't want to let that cloud our judgment. We don't want to do things that, you know, might end up going against our goals because we acted out of anger. But either way, it kind of sounds like this might be the last straw with Dad's behavior, so if he's saying he's gonna change, you know, that's up to you if you want to give him a chance to prove it. You know, he can say that he's gonna change, and then worst case scenario, he doesn't change, and things are as they are right now. And so, best case scenario, he does change, and things get better. Just used the Ninja Creamy for the first time. What an amazing machine. Oh yeah, I've seen those. Those look cool. They make ice cream from like frozen liquid. It makes like instant ice cream. They're also like $300. They're also very loud. You just basically put a frozen mixture in there and then you put it in the machine and it just blends it all up and then you got ice cream. Yeah, there's this YouTuber I follow that has one of these machines and he'll make like weird ice creams with it sometimes, and he also has the slushy machine and he'll make weird slushies. Vanilla, cottage cheese, and strawberries. That sounds pretty good. Cottage cheese and ice cream sounds gross, but the thing about cottage cheese is that if you blend it up, it's actually very creamy and smooth. How do I control anger? I can feel sadness, and I can control myself and gather my thoughts in it. I can do the same with happiness and excitement, but anything related to anger or triggers after it crosses a certain point, it just feels empowering. What are some neutral thoughts to replace the angry thoughts? Let's talk about controlling anger. Anger is a powerful motivator. And the thing about it is that you should allow it to motivate you in the right ways. Because there are things in life that you should be angry about. Injustice, inequality, fascism, Nazis. We should be mad about those things. What we don't want to do is take that feeling and redirect it into something else. Because then we're taking that energy that we could use to do something productive, something to help right a wrong, and we're turning it into something destructive. We yell at people we care about, we, get into arguments, we displace that anger. We take it out in a place that feels safe to do so. I'll share with you what I found helpful in learning how to control anger. Because there was a time in my life where I was an angry boy. Real angry. So angry. But no, anger's natural. Everybody feels it from time to time. And it might surprise you the things that you do while you're angry because they're so unlike the things that you would do when you're not angry. Like, you might not normally scream at the top of your lungs. You might not normally stomp your feet and slam your fists. But anger can be very quick acting, and it can make you express that energy in those types of ways. It makes you want to lash out. And so it's not so easy to just replace one thought with another thought, especially like an angry thought with a neutral thought. What I've found to be helpful in controlling anger is to take a step back from it. I'm not the angry one. I'm observing a person who is angry. I tried to, open up to a new perspective on my anger and trying to view myself from outside myself. And so that involved recognizing, like, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'5". And so if I'm big and angry, like, that can be intimidating. That can be scary. And, like, I don't want to intimidate people. I don't want people to be scared if I express my anger in such a way. And so I find it helpful to just take a step back and just view myself as a person who is angry. And then try to, view myself from that outside place. So I can see it more clearly for what it is and what it's doing. But what I found to be really helpful was learning how to laugh at my anger. Even if it wasn't funny, I would still try to laugh at it. Like, wow, look how angry I got at that thing that happened. That's kind of funny. Just give myself one of those, ha ha ha, ha ha ha, yeah. How wonderful. I've found that if you can redirect that energy, it takes some of the oomph out of it. One more thing, breathe. Slow your breathing down. Focus on your breath. When we're angry, our breathing gets thrown out of whack. We might hold our breath. We might hyperventilate. We might be breathing very quickly in and out. It's not good. Not good. Try to bring it back down. Just close your eyes. Take a couple breaths. Anger is very reactive. And what we want to learn to do is to not react, but respond. And responding involves giving yourself a moment before you act. And so you feel the anger building. How do I want to respond to this? What do I want to do with this? Just being mindful and aware. That's the way to do it. Now, you see, guys, it's actually my fault because I gave you all the impression that a Twitch chat is the place to go to have, realistic, meaningful conversations about heavy topics. And for 99.999% of Twitch chats, that's just not it. We are a league of our own here, so it's my fault for setting too high of a standard for you. You can put the blame on me. really 6'5"? Yeah, 6'5", and I probably clock in at like 230 these days. So I'm a hefty boy. They stack shit pretty high where I'm from. Are most criminals mentally ill? No, most criminals are poor. And being poor can contribute to the development of mental illness. That is true. You know, having social inequities, having a hard time, meeting your needs, that can contribute to stress, and stress left unattended can sort of fester into mental illness. I would say no, most criminals are not mentally ill, they are just desperate. They're just trying to find a way to cope and survive in a world that feels like it's stacked against them. And I don't mean the small crimes like theft. Oh, I guess I should have read that part first. I mean people who have done serious, heavy crimes. A lot of them are, but not all of them. As far as where that split would be, how about I respond to that with a statistic? In the United States, the top provider of mental health services is the correctional system. I wish I could turn it off like a switch. No, but you can tuck it into bed and tell it a story, and then once it falls asleep, you can go off and do whatever you want to do. You can go back to playing Sims 2. Let's look at it this way. Because I don't like the stereotype that, like, if you have mental illness, you're more likely to be a violent criminal. Not that you're implying that at all. I'm just saying that's kind of just a societal stereotype. I feel like a lot of people find themselves in prison that are mentally ill because there aren't adequate services for them on the outside. And so that's why there's an overrepresentation of mentally ill people in the correctional facility. What I need to do is work since my boss is looming. You can do anything for 5 minutes. So go do 5 minutes of work and then check in with yourself again, and maybe you can do another 5 minutes and then just repeat. Now, that being said, questioner, there is something worth talking about. And that would be antisocial personality disorder. This is when a person has a persistent pattern for the disregard of the rights of others. These people are often manipulative, deceitful, aggressive, or even violent. Just doing harm and showing no guilt or remorse for it. A lot of these people do find their way into prison. A lot of them also find their way into politics or corporations. It just kind of depends on how intelligent you are with your behavior. This is a really good topic to explore. Yeah, we'll talk about antisocial personality disorder and all of the different ways it manifests. This is the type of diagnosis that you would associate with somebody being a sociopath. They just have no regard for how other people feel. But it's also important to note that not all sociopaths are out to harm people. There are some people who have a sociopathic trend where they just don't really care how other people feel, but they don't do any harm to people. They just recognize that being kind and helping others is actually in their benefit. And so they'll do it, but not because they care, they just do it because it serves their own ends. Anyway, this type of stuff like sociopathy, antisocial personality disorder, it's interesting. I feel like you can be logical instead of emotional. Yeah, like you could be the type of person who's just like very cold, very logical. You know, you may not have very many emotional attachments in your life and it just doesn't really bother you. Anyway, I feel like we would have less crime and fewer people incarcerated if we actually had adequate mental health services in our country, so that's where I'm gonna end on that topic. This feels like a silly question. Silly questions are my favorite questions, so thank you. I live on the bottom floor of my apartment, and new people just moved into the space above me, and now I find myself wanting to step more quietly or shut doors more quietly. They live above you? They can't really hear you. What if they get disturbed by the noises? They'll get over it. I'm worried they'll be able to hear everything because I've heard some of their footsteps and doors. That's because they live above you. You'll hear all of their footsteps. They're not going to hear any of your footsteps because you're below them. They might hear your doors, but it doesn't really matter. It's just a door closing. It's not like you're blasting music. The thing about noises and being disruptive is that just one noise, you know, like, oh, close the door, or oh, I put a plate in the sink, and it clanked. It's like just one noise isn't gonna ruin anybody's day unless you lived somewhere where one noise did ruin somebody's day and they were always like, quiet, why are you making noise? You know, it's like, if you're not like bumping music, or if you're not like doing construction work and like running power tools, like they're gonna be fine with just the noises you make living in your place. Like it'll be just fine. What would make it even better is if you got to know them. You know, you went up and say, hey, I'm your downstairs neighbor, nice to meet you, my name's such and such. Hey, good to meet you, you know. So, are you new to the area? Some people may be unaware of how much noise gets out. Yeah, it's like, if you're in a room making noise, it's hard to gauge how far that noise travels unless you're actually outside of that room. You know, so you might be sitting there just moving and grooving, but, you know, you don't realize that people can hear you 3 rooms over. So I would just say, hey, you got some new neighbors? You know, maybe they're nice. Maybe they're nice. You know, having to hear other people like moving around and closing doors and stuff, that's just part of living in a shared community space like an apartment building. It happens. It just comes with the territory. And so don't worry about making the sounds that you need to make going through your day, just as long as they're not excessive and, you know, overly loud. A few times a day, you hear this sound that's almost like a giant pinball falling off a couch and rolling on their floor some distance. Any guesses, chat? Do they have a cat? Do they have a cat that's like knocking shit off the counter every day? They're like, how does this keep getting on the floor? It's the cat. Just... My neighbors do meth and I can hear them through concrete. Now, I'm as ACAB as anybody, you know, like, but if you're gonna be making a bunch of noise and smoking meth, I'm like, you gotta pick one, buddy. You gotta pick one. You're gonna be my neighbor, you gotta pick. You can't do both. You know, call in an anonymous noise complaint. I'm joking, obviously. I'm joking, obviously. Like, I don't want anybody doing meth. That was a joke. Yeah, you know what you should do is you should call the non-emergency line of your local police department and you should let them know that there's some reports of suspicious activity. You can smell what, you know, smells like what might be drugs and also just loud disruptive noises late at night. I'm like, I don't like calling the police. I don't want to ever have to call the police. I don't think anybody ever does. It's never fun when you have to call the cops. But if you're fucking with my sleep, fucking with my sleep, that's another story. How do you know what the drugs smell like? They're not gonna ask you that. They won't, and if they do, just say it was a weird smell, just like a burning chemical smell. You don't have to say that it smells like drugs, you can just say that it smells like burning chemicals. All of Oklahoma smells like meth. Meth is an epidemic that not a lot of people talk about. When it comes to drug use in America, we tend to hyperfixate on opioids, which, don't get me wrong, they are a tremendous problem. But what we often overlook are amphetamine abusers. What people tend to overlook is that there are millions of people who are just having to rely on hardcore stimulants in order to survive in capitalism. You know, they're having to work 3 jobs, they're having to, you know, it's... But you never really hear people talk about it. on like a national level, because it's just in small towns and, you know, rural areas, and, you know, it's not as dramatic as, you know, showing a bunch of people strung out on opioids under some bridge in Philadelphia, you know? So yeah, you don't have to tell the police that you smell meth, because they don't need to know that you know what that smells like, but you can just say it smells like burning chemicals, because that warrants a follow-up. They'll get the hint. Yeah, it is kind of wild that we don't talk about meth as often as we talk about opioids and stuff, when it really is, you know, doing a lot of damage to this country. I feel like most people here know somebody that either used to do it or is addicted to it or, you know, has a history with it. It's just all over the place. I know a couple people who have gotten over opioid addiction, but I know more people who have gotten over meth addiction. Can you talk more about your own feelings and general skepticism towards psychiatry as a real science? I think you meant psychology there. Psychiatry is just the medical application of, you know, psychiatric drugs. Psychology, though, would be the science. And yeah, like psychology, since it has to do with thinking and behavior, you know, it kind of goes outside of what you would consider a traditional science, because you can't measure it, you can't observe it. Well, you can observe it in some... Okay, anyway. I feel like a lot of the rules of science don't seem to apply. True, but they don't have to, because it's a different approach. Science is great at measuring. Science is great at, you know, finding laws and consistency and patterns. But when it comes to human beings, we're inherently a bit more unpredictable. You know, just when you think you've got somebody figured out, they throw you for a loop and they do something that's completely outside of the data set, and the science just can't back it up. And things like the DSM are just kind of vague and less helpful than the clout they have. It's true. The DSM is sort of in this like place of being like taken very seriously. It's like, oh, this is the big book of everything that could be wrong with your brain, and it isn't. It's meant as a diagnostic manual for people who work in the mental health field to kind of form a sort of, you know, way of documenting and, you know, anyway. Does psychology have purpose? Does psychology do good work? Does psychology help people? Does it help us to understand and to anticipate? I would say the answer to all of those is yes. And so I don't need it to be geology, I don't need it to be physics, I don't need it to be rocket science. It is what it is. It's our understanding of the human mind. And it's valuable, that research and that understanding. But don't treat it like law. In other fields of science, you would treat things as if they were laws. You know, if I drop a ball, it's going to fall down to the earth at a given speed because that's the rules. But when it comes to something so complicated as the human mind, the rules can be a little bit flexible, a little bit blurry. And so, if anything, if there was a field of science that I would say psychology is closest to, it would be meteorology, trying to predict the weather. You know, you can look at all the conditions, you can look at all of the data points, you can look at all of the patterns of history, and you can try to make a prediction, but that prediction could still be wrong. Another part of the reason why the DSM is so important is because insurance companies will use different diagnoses as a way of determining whether or not they pay for services. So that's another reason why we're so diagnosis heavy, is because people need a diagnosis to get their insurance company to pay for their treatment. That's it. That's why. I mean, that's a huge part of it, absolutely. Like, we see that this person came in and they were saying they have anxiety, but it looks like they weren't diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, so coverage denied. It's like, oh, you listed them as having this type of anxiety disorder? Well, actually, that's one of the ones we don't cover, so denied. Like, I've seen firsthand people get denied treatment for having the wrong diagnosis, so believe me, it does happen. However, I don't think that any of this takes away from the field of psychology as far as its value. You know, we're trying to make it work in the world that we live in, and I feel like a lot of what we put into our understanding of psychology and psychiatry is underlined by our capitalistic society. You know, we look at getting better as going back to work. That's how we determine success in mental health treatment. It's like, well, you're not able to maintain a job, so let's do something so that you're able to maintain a job again. So, this is coming from me, a psychologist. I understand the limitations when you look through the lens of traditional science, but I feel like I have some very important knowledge, and I've learned a lot of things just through real-world experience of working with people in the field. So I don't know if we'll ever be able to perfectly quantify the human mind so that it becomes entirely predictable and we're able to have psychology be a hard science, but I don't know if I would want us to ever get there. Would you really want us to get to a point where we understand every single thing about why we do what we do? Where would the fun be? It would take away all the mystery. Everything would be predetermined and already written, and then it would just be boring. I love psychology, and I don't really care if it's not a hard science. Because I don't need it to be. You know, it's in many ways closer to a philosophy. It's like an applied philosophy. You know, and there's certain amounts of like predictive work you're able to do, because that's what science is all about, being able to predict an outcome based on the data that you've collected. You can do the same thing, just in psychology, it always runs the chance of things just going completely different than you ever expected, because you've got that human variable involved. And if there's anything I know about human beings, we're an interesting bunch. Humans are weird, IMO. Yeah, but we love it. Yeah, weird is what makes things exciting. Like, you wouldn't enjoy, like, art and film and literature if artists weren't weird. You know, if artists were just boring and corporate, just wouldn't be fun. Even the hardest of science, like physics, present surprises. It's true, like, once you start getting into quantum mechanics, it's like... And you know what? I think that's part of what psychology has to deal with, is that it's kind of like quantum mechanics in a way. There's just too many variables. It's just not entirely predictable. But anyway, understanding psychology makes me feel like I understand chaos theory. Alright everybody, we've got a fun presentation for you today. Chat, what's your favorite therapy speak term? What's your favorite? Which one have you been using lately, or which one have you heard other people using lately? Gaslight, that's a big one. You hear that one all the time. We'll definitely go over that one today. Boundaries, another big one. We're gonna go through that one today. I think we've got 9 altogether. Narcissist, that one's in here too. Or using psychotic to describe people or things. I wouldn't classify psychotic as therapy speak, because that's not really a word that you would hear used in a therapeutic context. You might hear it more in like a clinical context, and so I would say that's more of like psychiatric speak. Learned helplessness by my therapist to describe me. Well, if it was used by your therapist, then that's okay. The problem with therapy speak lies in when it enters the public discourse and everybody starts using the word, but most people don't know what it means. But anyway, the strategy, you just have to find some learned helpfulness. All right. We've got some ground to cover. Are we ready? Alrighty, let's get into it. Let's talk about the rise and the misuse of therapy speak. Therapy speak. This is a trend that you've probably witnessed in recent years. This type of therapeutic language has moved out of the clinics and into everyday conversations. You've probably heard words like boundaries, trauma, gaslighting, toxic, just used as a part of cultural dialogue. There are some benefits to this shift. Greater awareness, a shared language for our emotions, which is really important. It also can help to reduce stigma around mental health. You know, we're able to normalize talking about it in many ways. And so there are benefits to the use of therapy speak. But there's also a dark side to it. And this comes from when the terms get misused, when they get oversimplified, or worse, when they get weaponized. They can lose that meaning, and they can even cause harm. And so this is what we're going to do today. We're going to explore both sides. We're going to look at the positives of therapy speak. We're going to talk about the risks of misuse. And we're going to go through a bunch of examples so that we can recognize the difference. Does ChatGPT psychosis count as therapy speak? All right, let's make a quick distinction real quick where we would draw the line between something being therapy speak versus something being like clinical psychiatry speak. Whenever people will use like diagnoses as a way of like talking about someone's behavior, like, oh, they're so OCD, or oh, they're so bipolar. That would be applying psychiatry to their speech, which is a different problem in and of itself. That's a whole other can of worms. We're talking about more like therapeutic concepts. Ways of like understanding and expressing and communicating emotion. And so it's still a misuse, and it's still related to mental health, but it's a little different because it's more of like a diagnostic thing. It's more of a clinical thing. Because it has to do with a diagnosis. So, let's talk about why therapy speak is all over the place. So glad you acknowledged the other can of worms. I can't get over the ADHD titles. Alright. This is gonna... I don't know. How hot is this take gonna be? Probably like medium take. Probably not even that hot of a take. Since you brought it up. This is part of how I feel about everybody having ADHD nowadays, and everything is a symptom of ADHD nowadays. People like to have something to point at when it comes to explaining what it is they think is wrong with them. And so if they have a hard time staying on task, if they're easily distracted, if they're a little bit scattered, they like being able to point their finger and say, that's the reason. That's why I am what I am. Some people do this because they want to get better, and then having that understanding and knowing what it is can help them to, do what they need to do to manage it. Whereas other people, I feel like they just like having something to blame. And so that's how I feel when it comes to diagnostic labels. You either take it as something that tells you, like, this is what I need to be working on, or people take it and they're like, I finally got something to blame for all of my problems in life. Everything that's ever gone wrong, it was not my fault, it was my ADHD's fault. How convenient. And so it's important to remember that doing the actual work takes time and effort, and not everybody has the time and energy to do that. And so you're going to see a lot more people just like pointing their finger at their diagnosis and being like, see, that's the reason why I am the way that I am. It's because I've got this. Versus those who are like, I sometimes have a hard time paying attention, but I'm working on it. They're actually doing things about it so that it doesn't bother them as much. But I feel like there are just some people who like having a convenient excuse instead of being focused on growth. And ADHD is just so much less weird to people than a lot of other clinical conditions. That's true. It is very non-stigmatized because guess what? Everybody has a hard time paying attention sometimes. There's this video where it shows from like a security camera view of a kid sitting in front of a TV, and they show him two different videos and then they watched how he paid attention. The first video is a math lecture, and he's like spinning around in the chair. He's just not able to focus at all on this math lecture. And then in the second video, he's watching Star Wars. And he's just dialed in. He's just locked in. And so I just don't want people to feel like they got ADHD because sometimes you have a hard time paying attention to shit that you just really don't want to pay attention to. Maybe spreadsheets aren't your passion. Maybe going to these 2-hour-long meetings that could have just been an email just isn't what you feel like you're here for. Anyway, I'm gonna bring it back in. Alright, we've been seeing over the past decade or so, mental health has become a lot more visible in mainstream culture. I feel like COVID had a lot to do with this too. COVID definitely, you saw more people talking about mental health stuff, and that's because everybody had to isolate in their homes, and they're like, oh my god, I finally have to, be left alone with my thoughts. But anyway, there has been an upward trend in the normalization of discussing mental health, and that's been going on ever since the 1990s. But it's really kind of ramped up over the past decade or so. ADHD is not destigmatized. If you actually have ADHD, then yes, because it's an actual, like, debilitating thing. But a lot of people will just treat the fact that they don't like to pay attention to stuff that they don't want to pay attention to as ADHD. And so instead of being an actual thing, it just gets watered down into this, like, well, I'm just so quirky. Like, oh, it's just a character trait. Just, aren't I such a goofball? Like, oh, forgot to bring the plates to the party. ADHD. And I feel like that you'll see that same phenomenon in the presentation here. You have the actual diagnosis, and then you have what everybody thinks the diagnosis is. And that's the problem we're dealing with. Is people who don't actually have, like, genuine ADHD just be like, aren't I so ADHD? Like, oh my god, my socks don't match today. I don't want to derail, but what is ADHD actually? That would derail, and so we're not going to derail. We're going to just keep on moving on. We'll talk about that later. You've probably heard the terms trauma, boundaries, gaslighting, more commonly used, even outside of places like this. Because you've probably heard those words here because we talk about them every day, but I mean in other places. You're seeing more of it in social media, you know, hashtag mental health matters, hashtag ADHD, hashtag, you know, mental health awareness. You're seeing it in podcasts. There's more people creating content around it. You're seeing it in self-help content. These words spread quickly through these ways. This is how they're able to become so widespread. This language helps people to feel empowered. They finally have the language to describe the complex emotional experiences that they've been having. Ah, that's the word for it. Okay. You've probably experienced this one yourself. You finally have the word for something. Doesn't it feel empowering in a way? Like, ah, okay. That's what it's called. So, we've taken terms that were once clinical jargon, and now they are everyday speech. And this has positives and negatives. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. An angle towards positivity is a nice thing to see trending, honestly, since too many things pull on the fear/anger string. You know, I agree. It's like, I think we've got enough of that out there, so we're gonna, you know, try to work in a different direction. I also view positivity as a form of protest. You know, if the world is too negative, then I'm doing this as an act of protest against all of that negativity. We're making being a good person punk rock. We're actually so cool. Isn't that from Woke Superman? Yeah, I watched it yesterday. Let's talk about the benefits of shared language. We briefly mentioned this, but I want to speak to it a little bit more. When you can name a feeling, it makes them feel easier to manage. It's hard to work on something that you can't put into words. Do you recommend I should go see it? It's out on digital already if you would rather watch it at home. But if you want to see it in the theater, you know, that could be fun too. I just watched it on my computer. When simply wanting to be healthy is counterculture, isn't it weird that that's where we're at? Can we have a movie night this week? You want to watch Superman? I liked it, and I'll be honest, I liked it more than Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four was okay, but I liked Superman better. When we have shared language for things, this allows us to be more open. You know, it's easier to say, I feel anxious, than it is to silently struggle. It gets the conversation going, it gets this discussion started. You're able to feel seen, you're able to feel understood, you're able to develop a mutual understanding. Language is one of the ways that we're able to build empathy for others. We're able to see each other in one another's struggles. There's another benefit to these terms, and it's also that it allows communities a way to support one another even outside of formal therapy. You know, you can be more mental health aware. You can be more mental health aware, and you can, you know, use this language, but in a genuine, productive, healthy way instead of just like as a buzzword. And so when it's used with care, this type of language can normalize growth and healing, and that's what we're all about. We want to normalize growth and healing because we're overdue for some. I don't know about you, but I feel like we're overdue. You know, not just as individuals, but collectively. Anyway, I liked Fantastic Four. It was fun. The aesthetic was neat. You know, it was an enjoyable movie, but I liked Superman a lot more. I felt like I took more away from it. There was more like human moments of discussion, you know, and just like, yeah, it just felt more meaningful, I guess. It felt like the Superman movie we need right now. No more dark, gritty, edgy Superman. Alright. Before we get into the examples, let's just take a moment to talk about the dark side of therapy speak. What are some of the consequences? Well, when words spread widely, they very quickly lose their nuance and their meaning. You know, by the time that skibbity got to me and you, like, we had no fucking clue what it was supposed to mean. Some people will use therapy speak in order to sound self-aware without doing the hard work of self-reflection. And that's going to be something that's really important to remember going forward. I just want you to keep that in mind. People will use this language to appear self-aware without doing the hard work of self-reflection. All right? So just take that one and just hang on to it. In some cases, people will even go so far as to weaponize the language. They'll use these terms not to connect, but to control you. And that's what you really gotta watch out for. The other behavior is just kind of annoying, you know, when people will do it to sound self-aware but not self-reflect. Like, that's annoying, sure, but when this takes it to a whole other level. When people will actually weaponize the language. And that's who you really have to watch out for. Misuse of these terms makes it more confusing to understand what the term actually means. And it kind of waters down some important concepts. And it can actually be harmful to relationships. You know, imagine a young couple in their 20s and they live together and one of them hears about the term boundaries and then they use it in an argument against their significant other. And since it carries this sort of therapeutic overtone, it feels more punchy. You know, it feels clinical almost. And so it can be harmful to relationships. Making chicken nuggets. You'll feel better after chicken nuggets. You got a lot of work to do, but I believe in you. I believe in you. You can take some of my energy. You can take some of my energy here. Just there you go. There you go. And lastly, in some cases, it even makes genuine struggles harder to talk about because people stop taking the term seriously. That's the dangerous thing that can happen from this, is that something that is supposed to be meaningful and help us understand each other, it becomes so diluted that it just loses its impact. It just doesn't. And you kind of see this with gaslighting. Gaslighting is one of those that's just been so overused, so misunderstood that it's just, it's hard to take it seriously anymore. Really hard to reflect because it can make you vulnerable. And I hope that for anybody who feels that way, who's not able to open up and reflect on themselves because it makes them feel vulnerable, I just want to let you know that On the other side of that vulnerability, there is peace, there is strength, there is comfort. You avoid that vulnerability because you fear that it's going to hurt you, and it very well may, but it's not going to kill you. It's going to make you stronger. This is too broad. I don't know what this manipulation would look like. Just wait. We're just about to get into the examples. You're right, it was too broad. Let's narrow it down a little bit. Let's go example by example. We were just working up. We were just getting started. That was just the appetizer. Alright, let's start with boundaries. Let's start with boundaries. Boundaries means you are setting limits on your own behavior to protect your mental and emotional health. Boundaries are all about you controlling yourself. Sometimes this might mean treating someone else differently, not spending time with them, not hanging out with them, not allowing them to violate your boundary. Boundaries are about what you do for you to protect you. An example of that would be a healthy use of the term, and the next several slides are going to follow the same template, so you'll get it once we get through this one. A healthy example of the word boundaries, or the application of the idea of boundaries, would be not checking your work emails after a certain time so that you can protect your rest. That's setting a boundary. Setting boundaries is how you maintain balance in your life, because if you don't have those boundaries, things are just going to run right over you. One of the ways that boundaries will be misused is when they're framed in such a way that you are restricting what other people can do. The unhealthy example would be, you're not allowed to hang out with those friends. You're violating my boundaries. This is the Jonah Hill example. If you're familiar with the story, Jonah Hill had some text messages with an ex that were leaked, and there's an example of him misusing therapy speak in this exact way. He was telling her what she is not allowed to do because it was a violation of his boundaries. Boundaries only have to do with what you do to protect you. It has nothing to do with controlling anybody else. I'll give you another example. Let's say that you have somebody in your life that calls you too often. They're just always blowing up your phone over every little thing. They're calling you all the time. They're calling you at work, and you don't mind talking to them after work, but you can't keep answering the phone while you're at work. You're going to get in trouble. So you say, hey, just so you know, I'm not going to have my phone on when I'm at work. And so if you want to talk to me, you're going to have to wait until after work. An unhealthy, because that's you setting a boundary. Unhealthy examples of boundaries often play off of other people's boundaries. What do you mean I can't call you? What if an emergency happens? You're not respecting my boundaries. When a person is used to violating your boundaries, and then you start to set boundaries for yourself so that they can't violate your boundaries anymore, they're going to feel like you're infringing on their boundaries. And I'm saying the word boundaries too many times, and it's starting to feel it's like one of those, like, say a word too many times. Anyway, we're going to keep on moving. The misuse of this term often disguises control as self-care. It always feels like people use therapy speak to obscure their selfish behavior because it gambles that the person doesn't completely understand the concept, but they know violating boundaries is bad, so they hope to make you feel you did a bad thing. Yup. And that's just an effort to try to control you. It's not actually them trying to take care of themselves, they're just trying to feel like they've got a point over you. Just in general, try to, just be cautious around people who are always keeping score. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying they're all bad or anything, but I'm just like, just in general, just kind of be mindful of that. Just like, so is it okay to let your partner cheat with a bunch of people? That's not a good rule. That's not a boundary, though. And so that's not what this... Okay, that's not the same thing as a boundary. You can have rules for conduct in a relationship. You can have expected behaviors of how you're going to treat each other, but that's not boundaries. Also, I'm just wondering why you took what we're talking about and just went to that example. But no, I'm happy to clarify. But no, it has nothing to do with that. The whole point of this is that I can only control myself. And you can only control yourself. And so I don't need to try to manipulate you, but portray it as if I'm taking care of me. Your boundary might be, if you cheat on me, I'm leaving. Exactly. Like, that could be a boundary. Like, okay, good example. For this to be a boundary, it would be, I would not stay with someone who cheats on me. That is a boundary that I have with myself. If anybody cheats on me, I will leave them. That would be the boundary. It has nothing to do with just being okay with people doing fucked up shit because it's like, well, I can't control them. Now, if you wanted to be okay with it, that could also be your boundary. You know, maybe you're just really into it and you don't mind it if your partner sleeps around. And sure, that could be your boundary too. Could be, it's your freedom. You get to choose what you want to. Boundaries are how you respond to other people's behavior, not a way for you to control other people's behavior. All right. Gaslighting. Sir Tylius, thank you for the 9 months. I've never seen an open relationship end well for the man. Well, yeah, that's because open relationships take a lot of emotional maturity, and that's not something that we really teach to men. We kind of teach them that feelings are gay and you can't cry and that you can only get mad and that anything other than that you should just never show to anyone ever. So I feel like a lot of men are ill equipped to handle something like that, and that's just a disservice that we've done to them as a society. You know, we have not emotionally prepared them for such complexities. Gaslighting. Number two. My mom's been a marriage and family therapist for 20 years and has never seen polyamory work. I don't think it has to do with men's immaturity. We're splitting hairs here, but we're talking about the difference between an open relationship and polyamory. Polyamory is, you know, a group activity, but open marriage is kind of like you go your way and you go your way, and then we come back together. And so that's different. I'm like, if you want to try it and if you want to try to make it work, more power to you. That's the way I look at it. I'm like, I'm not here to judge or criticize how anybody tries to find love in this life. The thing about since we're on the topic, I feel like a lot of people go into an open relationship for the wrong reasons. A lot of people go into an open relationship as a last ditch effort to try to save their relationship, but it obviously was doomed to fail. And so I feel like that's why it has such a low success rate, is because so many of the people that are doing it for the wrong reasons. I don't want to interrupt, but Casey asked us to ask you if you could take a photo of the list she left on the dining table and send it to her. True. Okay, alright, I'll go do that real quick. She'll need that. She's going to the Asian supermarket to go get stuff to make sushi, and she needs the list. Also, just important side note before I run off and go do this real quick. I forget what I was gonna say. Anyway, I'm too distracted. Let me go release the list. I'll be right back. We're releasing the list. Monkey's Paw wish. You wish that the Epstein list was released. Your name's on it. All right, I'm back. Anyway, when it comes to relationship stuff, I'm like, do what you want to do. Like, do what works for you. As long as, everybody's having fun and nobody's getting hurt, I'm fine with it. But I will just say that mo people equals mo problems. You start to get into the three body problem of physics whenever you start to bring too many people into, too many cooks in the kitchen. You don't want to spoil the broth. The three body problem. Get it? Get it? It's funny. It's funny. It's physics, but it's also too many cooks, too many cooks. Too many cooks, too many cooks. Alright, let's get into gaslighting. Let's get into gaslighting. The thing about gaslighting is it's very overused, it's very misunderstood, so it's lost a lot of its potency, I fear. But it's still really important to understand because people are still doing it. People are still doing it. Just because we've devalued the term doesn't mean that people still aren't doing the shit, okay? Gaslighting is something that's done deliberately to make someone question their memory, question their perception, or even reality itself. And they do this through denial, contradiction, and manipulation. It's a manipulation tactic. They want you to feel crazy. They want you second-guessing yourself. They want you doubting yourself so that they can control you. That's gaslighting. It's nefarious. It's insidious. And it's very real. And it's important to understand because it helps you to recognize the actual patterns of psychological manipulation that erode trust. Now, gaslighting can be very damaging because it can harm your ability to put trust in people. And oftentimes what the manipulator wants is for you to only trust them. No one else can be trusted. And so this can be damaging, and that's why it's really important to be able to recognize it. Where it ends up getting misused is when any disagreement, a lie, or frustration, you misremember something, it all gets labeled as gaslighting. You told me this morning that you would take out the trash and you didn't. Stop gaslighting me. You told me on Monday that you would go to dinner at my mom's on Thursday. Why are you always gaslighting me? Like, no, maybe you just forgot. Maybe you just forgot. Maybe... With imbalanced relationships, it can make the person distrust themselves. It's true. That's what it really does, is it makes you not believe your own brain. And that's something that's really messed up to do to somebody else. Make it so that they can't trust their memory, can't trust their perception, they can't trust reality. That's nasty business. That's dirty work. And so what is happening is that since it's so overused, it makes it harder for people that are actually experiencing real gaslighting to be taken seriously. That is the harm that's being done. I wonder if older people are more susceptible. Yes, especially the older they get. That's why older people are so often targeted by scammers and stuff. They take advantage of that, mental blind spot. Alright, so this is gaslighting. We understand this one pretty clearly, right? No questions on that. Shall we continue? We got some ground to cover. Let's keep it moving. Alright. Everybody's favorite. Let's talk about narcissist. Everybody's favorite. The term narcissist is supposed to just be applied to someone that has narcissistic personality disorder, which is a pervasive disorder that causes fragile self-esteem, a lack of empathy, and a deep need for admiration. Where people get confused is the difference between narcissistic traits and narcissistic personality disorder. People can have fragile sense of self-esteem, people can have a lack of empathy, people can have a deep need for admiration, but it might not necessarily mean that they meet the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. Someone with actual narcissistic personality disorder is going to be so above and beyond what you would think of as a traditional narcissist. It can be very disruptive to their life. They might pack up all their stuff, move across the country, sell all their belongings. Can a narcissist recognize if they're narcissistic? I think what everybody owes to themselves is to look inwards and to recognize whatever narcissistic traits you may have, because they're a natural human defense mechanism. What you're seeing with someone with NPD is a defense mechanism that has overtaken their life. The things that they do are things that most people do, just to a much lesser extent. You will meet far more people with narcissistic traits than you ever will actual, full-blown narcissists. Now that being said, narcissistic traits, fairly common. But the label itself of being a narcissist, that's when it starts to become psychiatry speak. You're diagnosing someone with something. Now, it's important to be able to recognize recurring patterns of emotional harm in relationships. Because when you are dealing with somebody who has very intense narcissistic traits, they will put themselves over you, and they will treat their emotions as primary and your emotions as secondary, and so they will do a lot of emotional harm. And it's important to recognize those patterns so that you can heal from that damage. But what if I'm always right? I think the better way to look at it is, alright, so in what way could I be wrong? That's the funny part about it. The actual way to be more correct is to just keep asking yourself, how could I be wrong? So that you're actually double checking for errors. You're anticipating there to be a mistake. And so you're actually giving it a thorough look instead of just like, yeah, this is good. Let's just go ahead and send it. I'm a real smart cookie. How do you deal with the person that demands to be praised as the smartest, prettiest on the planet? Well, in the United States, we elect them president for some reason. Typically, people only end up getting treatment for their narcissistic personality disorder if it's been very disruptive to their life. I'll give you an example. Like, let's say that somebody grew up in the middle of Iowa, like bumfuck nowhere, and they're convinced that they're going to be a movie star or they're going to be on Broadway or something. And so they go all the way up to the big city. They have to like hitchhike and, but they arrive with such a sense of entitlement, and they're just, they basically just ruin their entire life because they feel like I deserve to be there because I am the best. They will see it. They will see it when I get there. They'll see how great I am, and they're going to cast me. And they're going to put me in the star role because I'm a star, baby. It was meant to be. And then you get there and they're like, security, please take them out of here. And then you end up in an alley somewhere. And that's normally how people with NPD get into treatment if they do. They acted on those narcissistic beliefs to such an extent that it ended up just completely upheaving their life. Where it gets misused is when people will use it as just like a casual insult for someone who seems arrogant or self-centered. In reality, it's a pervasive thing. Now, I'm not gonna use narcissist as a casual insult for Donald Trump because he actually does show like every symptom. And so he's a great example of what an actual narcissist looks like. Everything's the biggest and the best, and, everybody else is a small brain and nobody else is as smart as me, and people are just telling me all the time, they're telling me all the time just how wonderful I am. Yeah, it's true. It's he's such a good example of NPD that you could use him as like a reference point to convince people or like to educate people on what it looks like. It's that good. You know what I mean? It's that clear of an example. Damaging to the country's psyche. It's true, we're all taking passive psychic damage right now just because of who's in charge of our country, but don't worry, we're here to do some healing. We're gonna counteract that. We're gonna counteract the damage over time. A little bit of an AoE healing spell. Anyway. We don't want to label people as narcissists just because they brag about something, just because they have an ego, or just because they like to be praised and recognized. Those are all things that it's normal for a person to want. A person's actually a narcissist when these traits become damaging to their life. And you see it. You see it happen in YouTubers and Twitch streamers, and you see it happen a lot on the internet. A lot of people are drawn in to those because narcissists are attracted to content creation like flies to a rotten banana. I wish I could leave and go to space. No, there's no oxygen up there. Oxygen's really important. Besides, we're already in space. We're just living on a gigantic spaceship that was built, you know, to be perfectly survivable by us. Life gets more fun when you start looking at Earth as a gigantic spaceship. Just saying. Just saying. Who's to say spaceship couldn't be round? Anyway, the misuse of the term stigmatizes people unfairly. Because maybe that person was just going through it in that moment. You know, maybe they were just leaning on their defense mechanisms. And we don't want to like write people off as being chronic, habitual narcissists just because they had a moment of ego. You know what I mean? And it also trivializes a pretty serious personality disorder, so... The same goes for any other misused word that also is a diagnosis. You know, we kind of talked about misusing psychiatry speak. This is a kind of good example of that too. You know, just throwing around words that have diagnostic weight to them and using them as like insults. I was wondering what the difference is between confidence or cockiness. That depends on whoever's observing it. It depends on who's observing it. You know, one person's confidence could be another person's cockiness. And I think the thing that matters is the results. You know, if you actually get the results you're looking for, confidence. If I clearly was underprepared and I failed spectacularly, cockiness. So it's when it's taken to an extreme degree, basically. There's also an aspect to it where they need to continuously reaffirm their greatness. Narcissists depend on what you call narcissistic supply. They need people telling them that they're great. They need saying, oh, good job. That was so wonderful. You did so good. They need that because that's how they stay fueled. And so that's a good giveaway that someone's got narcissistic tendencies, is they're always looking for a hit of that narcissistic supply. Someone, please, just tell me how great I am. Please, someone, I need a hit desperately. Oh my God. Oh, just tell me how great I am. Oh yeah, that's the stuff. All right, number 4. Would a person like this feel the need to tell you that they are perfect all the time? Yeah. If somebody's always telling you that they're perfect, that's a pretty good indicator that they've got some narcissistic tendencies. If you were so perfect, you wouldn't have to be reminding me of it all the time, you know? Like they'll just keep saying, I know I'm a 10 out of 10. And that's when you reply, I'm a 9 out of 10 because I always like something to work towards. Now I'm curious about the connection between gifted kids and narcissism. Well, I'll speak to that quickly because I want to keep moving. There's this phenomenon where kids who grew up and they were referred to as like gifted kids in school, you know, maybe like school just wasn't that hard for them. Maybe it came to them quickly and they were always just grown up. They grew up just being told how smart and talented and wonderful they were, but oh, you're so gifted. And then you never learn how to challenge yourself. You never learn how to like fail and have to try again. I think the problem is that school is just too easy in general. And also, like, school is just, it's not universal. You know, kids have different skill sets, kids have different aptitudes and interests, and we try to make like a universal curriculum, but it just doesn't really work because anyway, like gifted kids are kind of set up to fail because they don't know what to do whenever something doesn't come quickly to them. They don't learn how to appreciate putting in time and effort in order to learn how to do something because they're so used to succeeding and they're so used to being praised that whenever you encounter a challenge, it becomes, you know, a real obstacle. I often wonder if that label hurt me more than helped me. The only way that it helped you was to make you feel good about yourself. I don't see how it could really help you outside of that. Anyway, I feel like it's, you know, just the labels that we use that can really just have long-lasting impacts that we're not fully aware of. You know, as it turns out, there's some consequence to just, you know, making a child feel like they're special and that they're, you know, not like other kids and that, you know, they're smarter than other kids. And so it's like, yeah, it makes you feel good as a kid, but then you realize that they kind of just set you up to fail. Anyway. Yeah, I was in the gifted program in school. We got to do some cool shit, but it was mostly just like we hung out and solved logic puzzles and dissected owl pellets and, basically all I did in the gifted program was we just hung out and did puzzles. Anagrams and shit. It made me afraid to ask for help because I thought I was just supposed to know things. And looking back, clearly that was an unfair exception. You know, an unfair expectation. All right. Let's talk about the trauma label. Let's talk about that word. Trauma is another one that can get thrown around a little bit too commonly, and it's kind of watered down the actual meaning. In truth, trauma is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience that overwhelms your abilities to cope. That's why it sticks with you. That's why it continues to... It's basically like it gets stuck in your psyche. You know, it gets caught somewhere and it just ends up causing trouble. It's like a wrench in the gears. A healthy use of the label of trauma is that it can help you to genuinely understand events in your life that have affected your long-term well-being. You know, you look back and you're like, yeah, whenever I was this years old, this happened and it was traumatic for me. I can see now how it affected me. And I can see how some of those effects are still lingering today. Understanding that can open up the avenue to heal from it. Where it gets misused is when we use this label for just regular everyday stressors. I went to Starbucks today and they were out of oat milk. Hashtag trauma. That test was so hard, I'm traumatized. So what happens here is it waters down the seriousness of trauma. There are people who live with its effects daily. And we need to take it seriously. And so this isn't a term that we want to just throw around for anything that's inconvenient or stressful. Shall we? Let's talk about triggered. Run Jetta with the 7 months. Thank you for the support. This one is so overused. Oh yes. Oh yes. This one originated as a therapy term, and it's been vastly overused. The true meaning for a trigger or being triggered is when a person experiences an intense emotional or physical reaction that is tied to unresolved trauma. So this kind of ties into the one we just did. Me earlier today, keen awareness. I wasn't gonna say it, but you still recognized it, so thumbs up for that. You know, it's when a subject comes up and you see people not take it seriously because it's a very serious subject to you. Now it's important to remember, people haven't lived my life, people don't know what I've been through. You know, maybe this person is open to talking about it and then we can educate them on the subject so that they don't use such harmful language. We cannot lash out of anger. That just makes people defensive and it makes people shut off and it closes off avenues of learning and growth. Is there any way to prevent war trauma and PTSD, or is the cure being a psychopath? Some people are naturally just more resilient to trauma. We're not sure why. We're not sure what it is about them, but some people just appear to be largely unbothered. Now, it doesn't mean that they're a sociopath. It doesn't mean that they are, psychotic in any way. The best way to prevent war trauma and PTSD is to stop having wars. That's the best way to do it. Just stop blowing people up. Just stop sending young people off to die and, see their friends get torn to bits. That's a fucked up thing to do. And it really messes with people. So if you don't want it, I think the answer is to just stop shooting each other, stop blowing each other up. But, then again, you gotta think of the shareholders. There's a lot of people hoping to make a lot of money off of selling all those weapons. And it would be, wrong of us to tell them that they're not able to do that because we don't want to kill people anymore. Yeah, imagine if the army did like Corps of Engineer work, and so they actually did infrastructure work on the country instead of blowing up infrastructure in other countries. A healthy example of the concept of being triggered is when somebody with PTSD hears fireworks and it makes them feel panic or makes them feel unsafe. That is a good use of the term. That is what it's supposed to mean. Where it gets misused is when it becomes a term that is used sarcastically to mock someone for being upset or sensitive. Somebody should let people know that using triggered as an insult is anti-veteran, so. You've probably seen countless examples of it. You've probably even been called it a few times. You spend long enough on the internet, you've definitely seen it happen. People are calling each other out over being triggered over just the stupidest shit. And what this does is it invalidates real trauma. And that isn't cool. It does harm to veterans. It does harm to people who have had to... It does harm to people who have endured trauma. And that's just such a shitty thing to do. I'm anti-war, but I'm pro-veteran. I recognize that a lot of young men got conned into signing up for armed service. They just thought it was an easy way to pay for their college. Next thing you know, they lost a leg and half of their friends. What would you call right-wingers complaining about pronouns? They're not triggered, they're what? Over-entitled? They're insecure, is what they are. Anything that goes too far outside of their preconceived worldview is frightening and scary to them, and so they lash out at it. That's why. They're just small-minded and scared. Alright, that's number 5. Let's move on to number 6. This one's more recent. This one's newer. Let's talk about attachment styles. Attachment styles are a real thing. Attachment styles are all about the patterns of how you relate to other people that you form early on in life. What are your relationships like with your parents when you're a kid? Or other children, or with your teachers? You know, what type of attachment patterns did you form based on those early life experiences? Do you have secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant or disorganized attachment? A healthy use of this is to recognize how your attachment style influences your adult relationships, so that you can do something about it. By the way, it's an avenue for growth. It's an avenue for growth. We understand it so that we can do something about it. You're not locked in. Where attachment styles gets misused is when we treat it like a fixed personality type, or we use it to make excuses for bad behavior. I ghost people because I'm avoidant. It's just who I am. I have anxious attachment style. I can't help but cheat. You know, it's that kind of stuff. It's like people are putting it in their dating profiles now. People are using this in regular conversations, and a lot of them are just using it as excuses for bad behavior. Or they're treating it like it's their personality type. When in reality, the whole point is to understand it so that you can find more secure attachment, not so that you have a convenient excuse to be an asshole. I see them in Bumble bios like it's Myers-Briggs. Yep, it's true. It's true. We've gotten to the point in online dating where we're trying to preemptively psychoanalyze our potential partner. Isn't that fun? It's overthinking to the fucking maximum. When we misuse, it shifts from self-awareness onto justification. We don't want to use our understanding of attachment styles to justify being a shitty person, all right? We don't want to use it to justify our bad behaviors. But that's what a lot of people will do. Like, by the way, I have anxious attachment, so I can't be committed. Like, just expect that I will cheat in this relationship. I've cheated in all of my relationships. By the way, fuck anybody who says that. Have you ever heard anybody say that before? Like, I cheat in all of my relationships. It's like, okay, well, first off, fuck you, dude. Should psychoanalyzing just be left to the professionals? The thing about psychoanalyzing is that everybody does it. The professionals are just better at it. We're all trying to suss each other out. That's just part of life. And so we're all trying to do a little bit of psychoanalysis. Some of us just studied. Anyway, attachment styles is a much more recent one, but you've probably heard it, you've probably seen it. I've heard it mentioned on like reality TV dating shows. I've heard stories of people including it in their bios on their dating profiles. In fact, many of you here probably know your attachment style. Maybe you took a quiz. The thing about attachment styles is it's not a diagnosis. It's just an understanding of your patterns. That's it. The reason to understand your patterns is to recognize the ways in which they're harming you so that you can mend those patterns and find new patterns. Anyway. It's all about developing a more secure attachment style. so that you can have more meaningful relationships, so that you can, have more closeness with your loved ones. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. Don't use it like it's a horoscope. Be like, oh yeah, can't help it, I'm a Scorpio. Like that kind of stuff. And just for clarification, I'm not a Scorpio, I'm actually a Leo, and because I'm a Leo, I had to mention it. Anyway, if you ever run into somebody who uses their attachment style as an excuse for their bad behavior, just politely ask them, so what do you plan on doing about that? You're aware of the pattern, so what would you like to change about it? All right. With the taste of your lips, I'm on a ride. It's toxic. I struggle with friends who let their attachment style ruin other friendships. They don't see that their pattern is ruining things and don't want to change. Ugh. Right? Remember, you may have been here at the start. We talked about one of the key threads that you'll see here is people using these types of terms as a way to appear aware. They want to appear aware, but they don't want to actually do the work. They're like, oh, okay, I get a free pass to be an asshole because I have this thing. Okay, perfect. Most people aren't going to turn that down. A free pass to be an ass? A lot of people are going to take that opportunity. People love to feel justified when they're naughty. That's my struggle. I'm waiting for them to do the work. You're planting seeds. You're planting seeds, and that's all you can do. Hopefully they found good soil. All right, it's toxic time. This is another one that you've probably heard get thrown around quite a bit. This one also is a therapeutic term, and we use it to describe harmful, repeated patterns of behavior that cause emotional damage. Constantly yelling, constantly slamming things, being passive aggressive, being regular aggressive. Manipulation, abuse, any number of things can be described as toxic. A healthy use of this would be to identify a relationship that consistently drains and harms you. That's what you would identify as a toxic relationship. If you feel consistently drained and harmed by it. I bet you've had one. I bet you've had one. I feel like most people have had at least one toxic relationship in their life. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe it was just a friend for a short amount of time. Maybe it was a friend when you were young and dumb and full of it. Or hell, maybe we were the one. Maybe we look back at some of our past relationships and be like, damn, I was a little bit toxic there. Where this ends up getting misused is labeling anyone that disagrees with us or anyone that we dislike as toxic. I can't believe they didn't text me back. So toxic. I don't think I've ever used this word. Well, you've got another arrow for your quiver. All of these words, even though some of them are overused, they're still important concepts to understand. So I wouldn't want anybody to, not take these types of terms and concepts seriously because they should be. Don't let the fact that they get overused in regular everyday conversation take away from what they actually mean. Is being a breadwinner and holding that over someone's head toxic? Would you describe it as a harmful, repeated pattern of behavior that caused you emotional damage? If so, the answer is yes. Now see, another important thing to recognize is that we can identify someone's toxic behaviors but not be affected by them. This is something that you will learn if you were to ever go work in the mental health field. You'll learn that sometimes I just need to be more patient and understanding and recognize that this person is acting because of their symptoms. And if I'm going to help them grow and learn, I'm going to have to be patient. People aren't just toxic because they want to be controlling and manipulative and they're evil. People can sometimes be toxic because they're scared. People can sometimes be toxic because they're just fearful and they're insecure. There's all number of reasons why a person might engage in toxic behaviors. Is there a distinction between toxic behavior and poisonous behavior? Yeah, one happens when you eat it and one happens when it bites you. No, not really. It's basically the same to my understanding. Anyway, overuse of this term makes it meaningless. It can prevent real accountability. If everything that we don't like or disagree with is toxic, then the actual term has no meaning. Did Brittany use it right? I'm sure she did. I'm sure she was great. All right, term 8. This one's gonna throw you for a loop. Let's talk about self-care. Let's talk about self-care. In reality, self-care refers to intentional practices, things that nurture our mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Examples of this include going for a walk, journaling, taking time for rest, doing your hobbies, spending time with friends. There's any number of ways to engage in self-care. But it's meant to be intentional and it's meant to be, nurturing to you. This is something that can also be misused. We don't want to misuse self-care as a way of justifying procrastination or indulgence or avoidance of responsibilities. I need to get a little bit of extra Taco Bell. That's good self-care. Maybe I should get an extra couple burritos. Maybe I should just take another... Maybe I should just go get a big cheesecake. Does treat yourself to food or sweets count? It very easily could. We justify indulgence under the guise of self-care. Or like, oh yeah, I had a whole box of cupcakes, but that's just me practicing good self-care. I needed it. I needed it. It was good for me. It felt good while I did it. Our brains tend to equate "it felt good while I did it" as self-care. But that's not what self-care is all about. Self-care does feel good a lot of the time, but it doesn't always feel good necessarily. Sometimes it just feels like a relief of pressure. Sometimes it feels like things moving. Sometimes it feels like processing. You know, like journaling, for example. It's like maybe you have to journal about something particularly difficult. It helps you to heal and it helps you to let go, but it might not feel good while you're doing it, but in the long run, it's still self-care. I need my emotional support burger. Me too. I love an emotional support cheeseburger. Do you have any presentations on parent/parenting? I have some on parents, but not on parenting. Misuse of this term reduces a valuable tool for resilience into an excuse. You know, and so self-care is something that we should be doing because it's good for us, it nurtures us, it helps us to meet our needs. This can be another term that just gets, people just get carried away with it, and they use it to justify just anything that feels good to them. Accountability. All right, let's get into it. Accountability is all about owning your actions, taking responsibility, and repairing harm when possible. That is what accountability means. It's all about recognizing and saying, you know, I hurt you, I was careless, and I want to make it right. Where accountability gets misused is when people weaponize it as a way to shame or punish others, especially in public. And so the example here would be online call-outs that are framed as holding someone accountable, but really we're just seeking revenge. I can't believe what this person said. I'm gonna post screenshots. You know, you see this happen all the time on the internet. People just frothing at the mouth over something that happened. Not because they care, but just because they want to, you know, have revenge on this person for some reason. You'll see it all over the comment sections on Twitter. All these online call-outs. The whole point of accountability is to inspire growth and change, and not just to, you know, feel like you gotta win over somebody or to deal damage. So when we misuse it, it undermines the possibility of growth and reconciliation. This is the kind of stuff right here that you see all the time on the internet. You see this kind of stuff all the time on the internet. People calling each other out as a means of trying to hold them accountable, but not because they actually care about them being accountable. They don't care if they learn and grow. They're just doing it because it's drama, or they're trying to feel like they have one over on the other person, or they're just lashing out trying to hurt them. Yeah, it's why people do like like exposés. It's why people do like YouTube videos where they just like talk about somebody ad nauseum. You know, it's some of the worst content ever. That's why I don't go on Twitter. Don't. Good. Don't. Twitter has gotten way worse than it was, and it was already bad. It's worse. It's bad. It's like very fascist. It's like very racist. It's bad. It feels like 4chan over there. I'm talking like racist memes, slurs, just like you don't want to go there. It's real bad. Anyway. Accountability. All right. So we made it through the examples. Here are some red flags. Here are some red flags that someone is misusing a therapy term. Here are some things to watch out for. Is the person using the term to shut down discussion instead of opening up the conversation? Are they just saying it to win an argument? Or are they just saying it to, put the final word in? In general, the thing you want to look out for is when people use this type of language as a means of ending a discussion, when in reality, these types of terms are just where the conversation gets started. Like, these are conversation openers. And so when people use them as conversation closers, that's a red flag. Because they're not actually interested in discussing the concept. They're not actually interested in having a conversation. They're just using it to leverage a win. Another red flag is when responsibility is shifted outwards by focusing on controlling others instead of reflecting inward. What I mean by that is when people will understand these types of concepts and they'll use this type of language, but it's all about other people's behaviors. They're very good at pointing out other people's toxic behaviors. They're very good at identifying all these things in other people, but I'll be damned. They never look inward. They never work on themselves. They're very good at pointing out everybody else's problems, but they don't have that same ability to look inwards. So it's everybody else's problem. Everybody else needs to take care of themselves. I'm perfect, on the other hand. Another red flag is when it just feels performative. It just feels like they're just using it so that they can appear wise or informed. Like, oh, look how emotionally aware I am. Look how mature I am. Aren't I so intelligent? Oh yes, it would appear that you are gaslighting me due to your toxic attachment style. Perhaps it's due to some sort of trauma. It's a big red flag when people are just using it to be showy. Or if it just feels like people are using it as a buzzword, which you'll probably catch a lot of. It just feels like, I've never heard this. This person's never really shown much interest in like mental health, or, I've never seen them like take a class on psychology. I've never seen them go to therapy or anything, But now here they are just talking about attachment styles all the time, like, huh, where did that come from? And so it's more of like a trend. It's just a buzzword. It's not actually a genuine attempt at understanding. It's just a cute little thing that everybody else is doing it, you know? Everybody else is taking the quiz to find out what type of sandwich they are, and so I want to see what type of sandwich I am. So I want to fit in. Ooh, everybody's talking about attachment styles. I need to figure out what my attachment style is. If the language feels like a tool of manipulation rather than actual care, it probably is. I want to know what kind of sandwich I am. I could help you figure that out. What type of bread would you have? Would it be like a hoagie roll? Would it be like a slice of white bread? Would it be like some sourdough? Like, I'm a meatball sub. That's what I am. I'm big and meaty. Satisfying. A rye bread? Are you a Reuben? Therapy speak is best when it builds trust, connection, and empathy between people. When it focuses on self-awareness and personal responsibility rather than blame. When it helps to clarify emotions and experiences in ways that deepen communication. And when it keeps the original meaning of the terms intact, respecting their seriousness. At its best, therapy language is not about sounding wise, it's about living more wisely. And so just because overuse may have watered down or taken away from the meaning and understanding of some of these words, this does not take anything away from the importance of these concepts. These things are important to understand, and it's important to take them seriously. Because we're talking about serious stuff. We're talking about you. All right, let's wrap it up. It's been a big, long one today. Therapy speak can be a bridge toward better understanding when we use it sincerely. But when it's turned into buzzwords, it can create confusion, harm, or even manipulation. So the key is to remember that these words are tools, not weapons. Growth doesn't come from throwing around terms, but from embodying the empathy and accountability they point to. Language shapes culture, but sincerity shapes healing. Told you it was going to be a long one, but we did it. Chat, this has been the presentation on the misuse of therapy speak. Hopefully you found it riveting. Maybe we learned a thing or two. We're all caught up in the question box. Presentation is done. What is ADHD? Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. ADHD is when your boss says fill out these spreadsheets and your brain says, I don't think I want to do that, so I won't. Are there people that function without Strattera or Adderall? Yeah, you can train your brain to focus. The only thing that stimulants do is make things more rewarding. They don't actually do anything to help you learn how to focus. They just make focus feel better. And you can see how that would potentially be habit forming. You build up a tolerance to it. It can also be a double-edged sword because it doesn't pick and choose what it is that you find rewarding. Everything's more rewarding to do. And so that could mean it's more rewarding to do my work. It's more important to it feels better to do my studying. Or it feels good to like just do a deep dive into Wikipedia and like read all these random articles about stuff. It can send you completely down some weird, irrelevant rabbit hole, and it feels good to do it because it feels rewarding. The limitless pill was real, would you take it? Yes. Yeah, why not? Unlock all of the potential of my brain? Sure, I'm in. I haven't seen the movie though, so I'm assuming there's no consequences? The mob. The mob. Always ruining a good time. Alrighty, everybody. I think I'm gonna wrap it up there for today. Casey should be back soon, and we're gonna be making some sushi together. Anyway, I'm gonna go take care of the dogs, and Casey should be back soon, and we'll be making some sushi, so I will catch you all later. Y'all have a good night. Y'all have a good night. I will see you all later. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see y'all next time. I'll either see you later or I'll see you tomorrow. Alright, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. There's this YouTuber I like, and he turns everything into pickles, And at the end of every video, he's like, I love you. Think about me. Bye.